Hey, so what's up? In today's episode, we're going to be talking about why and how addiction and incarceration go hand in hand for multiple reasons. And to jump right into it, there's the obvious things. So you develop an addiction, and there comes a point for most people, not all people, where you can no longer fund your addiction the way you used to be able to, whether it's the cost as far as, quantity. Obviously, you used to be able to do a little, and now you're doing more and more to achieve that same effect, ultimately. Well, with that being said, in addiction, it's hard for individuals to hold down a job, whether that's, they just don't want to go because they're busy out chasing that bag, or, they're sick because they don't have it, etc. So a lot of times people result in committing crimes to feed that addiction. So with that, you commit crimes, and in turn, you're bound to get in trouble. So that's one of the more obvious things, if you will. Or, there's another route. A lot of people, they will get into it first because of money. Maybe they're not an addict and that's not their thing, right? Well, you start selling something long enough, you get curious, and then that can snowball into an addiction. But, you have the means, you're getting rid of whatever, so you have the means to continue to get loaded, but you're selling it. So ultimately, especially with like opiates, a lot of the people that you're talking to and dealing with, especially now, a cop drives past them and they're like, oh my God, I'll tell you everything. Like, it's so ridiculous. Like, they're so terrified to go to jail and be sick that they would tell on their own mother if that's what was necessary. So, in selling opiates, a lot of people are obviously shady because of their addiction, but they will tell on you, no questions asked. I mean, I can think of a few instances of people that have told on multiple people, but they're good money, What happens when they get hemmed up and they're going to hem you up? But it's so crazy to me. And also, there's just that random, if you're selling drugs, you're doing transactions one way or another. Maybe you're the guy up here and you're selling to 4 people who are doing it at the street level, but you still got to do those 4 transactions. So let's go even one step further. Let's say you're the guy that is giving it to somebody who's doing 4 transactions. You're still doing that one transaction. And even if you're hands off, if that money's getting back to you one way or another, there is some sort of trail. So that obviously can ultimately lead to incarceration. But then there's a little bit more basic level. So you get individuals that have been doing drugs, period, uppers, downers, whatever it may be, and in that life, you lose 99% of your responsibilities. The things you're worried about is getting loaded, how you're going to get loaded, and getting loaded. I mean, that's your main concern. That's what you're worried about. That's what's on your mind. So everything else slowly fades away, whether you have children or not. I've seen it time and time again. So, you do this for years, and you consciously and subconsciously get used to it. You have no responsibilities. You don't have to answer to anything or anyone. You don't have a job. The only thing you got to answer to is that bag, whatever it may be. So, like I said, you do this for years and years, and you get used to not having any responsibility and just doing what you want when you want as you please. So, you get busted. Let's say you go to prison for 2 years. Totally just random numbers, right? So you get in there and you're like, I want to be clean. Because believe it or not, a lot of people start out their addiction maybe wanting to do it, or it's interesting, fun, exciting, whatever. But once you get into those trenches of it and it just becomes no fun anymore, most people don't want to be in that situation doing that. Like, they're not enjoying themselves. So you go to prison and you have time to get clean and kind of figure your stuff out, and you start doing good. You stay clean in there. There is totally access to stuff, but a lot of times it's so expensive, or you've had enough time to get into the right mind state where you're like, look, I just don't want to do it. So, in prison, it's kind of like being out in the streets in addiction. You don't really have any responsibilities. You're told when to eat, where to eat, and what you're going to eat. You do get a job, but some of them are so, mindless. And then there is nicer jobs you can apply for, but it's another, you're told when to go, how to go, what to do there. Like, there's no, you don't have to fend for yourself as much. You don't have to make these decisions on your own. A lot of times you're going to get assigned a job. Like, a lot of people, one of your first things will either be working in the kitchen, which is a little bit lower. Most people don't want to do that. And then there's like orderly jobs where you're sweeping and mopping in your either cell block or dorm or whatever the situation is, which, depending on where you're at, can be a desirable job, but it generally doesn't pay good. So, but with that being said, you don't have a lot of responsibilities. You got somebody telling you what you're going to do and when you're going to do it, and you don't have to worry about, this bill has to get paid, this, that, and the other. So that, it is another way they correspond, addiction and incarceration. So your 2 years goes by, you get out, you're expected to check in with your PO, and then you got to find somewhere to live. Most people don't want to live in a shelter. Well, in order to find somewhere to live, you ultimately have to have a job or some source of income. So, you start doing these things. You get out, you check in with your PO, you start looking for work, and let's say you can't find work. Well, that is a discouraging thing. Then let's say you find work, but it's something you hate. So that gets discouraging. And then you gotta pay bills, or you're starting to get late on your bills, so you owe more money. All that stuff is responsibility. So you get these people who are addicts, and they're used to no responsibility on the street when they're out there running and gunning, doing whatever. And then they go to prison and they don't really have responsibility. And then they get put out onto the streets, and they have to fend for themselves one way or another. So, if they don't catch any breaks, or they don't, a lot of times they just end up going right back to what they know, which is using drugs, doing crime, things of that nature. So, to me, I think that's one of the bigger factors in how, responsibility addiction and incarceration go hand in hand. Is you live anyway. Doesn't matter if it's without responsibilities, with no matter what it is. Brushing your teeth 3 times a day instead of 2, or you do something for long enough, years and years and years, and it becomes normal. So you get these people who have had no responsibilities, were in addiction for 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years, and it's hard to change. I mean, it can be really hard. Like I said, anything that you do for that long is going to be hard, but then you get a mind or mood altering substance, something that makes you feel good, and then you have to quit that, and it can be hard. And then there's definitely other things, reasons, ways that addiction and incarceration go hand in hand. But I think those are the main ones, and I really wanted to touch on that because it's something that has been seen for years, is still seen, and will continue to go on. And there's really not a good fix for the situation other than just teaching people the skills they need, which in some states is happening more and more. They're starting to offer more programs because most anybody can get out and get a job, right? McDonald's, whatever. But you can't live off that in 90% of places in the world. So they're starting to teach trades in prisons, whether it be, welding or HVAC, or they're coming up with more and more skills. So when you get out, you can get a better job and there's room for improvement. Whereas, don't get me wrong, you hear those stories about people getting the job at McDonald's and becoming a manager, then a regional manager, and then, franchisee or whatever. There is opportunity there, but it takes a lot longer, and opportunity in the end is less. So, I don't know. It's unfortunate on one hand, the cycle, but that's just part of addiction. Fortunately, in some areas, things are starting to change, and they're realizing this. But at the end of the day, prisons in general, state, private, federal, it unfortunately is a business. If there's money to be made somewhere, they're going to want to protect that investment. And when you have people that can't quite hack it out in the free world because nobody's giving them the right tools, that's essentially a return on your investment for them. If you're going to reoffend and come back, that's more money in their pocket. As messed up as it sounds, it's true. But then you get places where, different parts of the world that they focus on rehabilitation and re-entry and integrating you back into society to be successful and do well, where their prison rates are so low. But they're not turning it into a business. They're not trying to make millions of dollars off incarcerating people, which sounds so just wrong, Why, especially, as Americans, want to prey on the downfall of, our citizens, our brothers, whatever you want to call it. It's unfortunate, but it's just the reality of the world. So with that, I'll quit, yakking at you guys, so to speak. I hope you really enjoyed what you saw, and maybe it was insightful to some of you. And just know that, there's tons of programs out there, if you look, that will help you once you get out. I got some paperwork on some things that I will talk about at a later date. This big one is a federal bonding program, where essentially the federal government will give an employer a $10,000 insurance policy on you if something happens or you whatever. But that's at a later date. So with that being said, please give me a like and a subscribe if you enjoyed what you're watching, and stay tuned for more things to come. And remember, if I can do it, you guys can do it for sure. Till next time, peace out, guys.